For a lot of people around our area, this is a big week because of a football game. Ole Miss and Mississippi State play each other this week, and as always, things can get heated, things can get excited, and so we have two greats from these universities to talk a little bit about the rivalry, talk about their experience, and talk about maybe some things that they've seen over the course of being involved with their universities. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Guys, tell us your name, a little bit of your history with the respective universities.
Well, I'm John Darnell. Grew up in Corinth and signed with Ole Miss to play football in 1985 and was there from 1985 to 1990.
Todd Jordan, grew up in Tupelo, played at Tupelo High School, signed with Mississippi State spring of '89. I was there 89 through 93.
Yeah. So I'm a huge sports fan. I grew up playing basketball. You guys know that sports a lot of times has the tendency to bring out a lot of good, particularly in athletes, but also, especially this week, it has a tendency to bring out some of the worst in fans. You guys have maybe any stories of fans getting a little too carried away or anything like that? So.
Well, for me, I think when you're playing, and Todd can add to this probably too, but when you're playing, you're kind of in a bubble, and you better not get too caught up in the rivalry. You better pay attention to what your job is during the football game, especially when you're a quarterback. And you did grow up and realize there was a rivalry, but I don't think till I got out of college and got out as a civilian, I guess you call it, that I really understood how passionate people are about it. And because you don't really see that side when you're in it. Of course, we didn't have social media back then, thank goodness. But people are passionate about their schools, and they want to win, and it becomes a really tough thing to handle sometimes, especially when you got some split marriages and Ole Miss and State, and you got good friends. But I've always kind of looked at it as a player perspective, and if I was probably watching the game with Todd, I would probably never think of Todd as a fan of Mississippi State. I'd probably think of him as a former quarterback, and we would probably talk more about what's going on during the game. But I mean, when people come up to me and send me things, send me text, and during the week I realize this is a little different out here in the real world like this. So anyway, it's a fun week. You want to try to make it fun. It's a big game for both schools, and our fans take it serious. So does Mississippi State. So you just try to channel that, and I try to think of it personally as I try to think of it as I did as a player, and not get too caught up in the rah-rah back and forth.
Well, during the year, obviously, you have 10 games or 11 games leading up, so you have to stay focused on that, but you're always hearing in the background, the last game, and that's what it is. It's the fans. You hear a lot from the fans, and like John said, a lot of split families as far as Ole Miss and State, and you just. But when it becomes game week of State and Ole Miss, that is the game. There's no other game that you're thinking about, and you play with a lot of guys from out of state, so they don't really realize the rivalry until after the first game that they played, and then they become part of that rivalry, and it gets pretty heated at times. John wasn't a part of it, but the 1990 game, there was a pretty good fight, and that was my first real, growing up as a State fan, obviously you knew the rivalry, but that was the first time you're thinking this is really a real deal with that fight. And things, when you get out, like John, you graduate, you start hearing the people that are in the workforce, and I think they have to, go back and forth all year. And unfortunately, the older you get, the worse it gets.
Yeah. So you guys have still stayed connected to the universities long after your playing days. You guys probably have seen a lot of things. One of the things we always like to ask people is, no matter where you are in your life or your connection to the world around you, like God moves in all different types of ways. So have you seen any places where maybe God has moved, maybe as a player or maybe afterwards in the years since you've been playing, just in your connection with the university?
Well, I think the time of year that the State Ole Miss game is very important. It's always around Thanksgiving. So you get families that are together, State and Ole Miss in between, and they watch the game, but after the game, you're back to family. So I think the time of the year, being Thanksgiving, is definitely an important part of a rivalry.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's a lot of times where we've eaten Thanksgiving dinner and drove to the game or, watched it. But I agree. I mean, I think it helps you kind of look at yourself in those situations, and you see people acting crazy during those times, and it kind of, you say, well, I certainly don't want to be like that, and I hope I'm not, and so God works in the good and the bad. So, whoever loses is going to be mad, whoever wins is going to be really happy, and so, but it works in both instances, I think.